What is up, my imagination connoisseurs? It is me, the notorious RMB, coming at you from sunny Southern California. And my God, is it sunny today? What a glorious day in the city on this Martin Luther King holiday Monday. Fantastic day. Well, something happened over the last couple days, over the weekend, that I've been thinking a lot about. And that is, of course, the rival. Some say rival. I would say that they're both they're bookends of the same story. But both Hulu and Netflix dropped documentaries about the same subject: the FYRE festivals or festival, the FYRE Festival. We have two documentaries about the ill-fated FYRE Festival that I watched with utter fascination, and I honestly believe anybody who's interested in embarking on a large project that requires many moving parts and a lot of logistics and manpower, I should say people power, should watch these documentaries. There's Gilbert, ladies and gentlemen, making an early appearance in this video. Anybody should watch these documentaries because they are fascinating on many, many levels. Now, one I think is just called FYRE, and the other one is called FYRE Fraud. Now, for those who don't know, what is the FYRE Festival? I'll give you a quick recap, but you should watch the documentaries. Basically, a kind of a douchey investor, a kid, a young hustler, young entrepreneur named Billy McFarland, who was living in New York, who was coming up with one scheme after another, and Ja Rule, the rapper Ja Rule, teamed up, and they wanted to create a brand new musical festival that would rival, say, Coachella or Burning Man. But this festival was going to peddle, as a big part of its DNA, exclusivity. And it was going to be posh, top of the line. It was designed to be for celebrities, media and social media influencers, people that were basically rich. And they were selling this ideal experience. And a lot of this, they wanted to create a sense of FOMO for those who know what that means. FOMO is an acronym for fear of missing out, which is what drives a lot of our current social media and influencer culture. And Billy McFarland was sort of building his businesses, multiple businesses. He had multiple businesses in New York that were sort of based around this idea of FOMO and celebrity culture. But so what FYRE Fest was supposed to be was the most exclusive of the exclusive music festivals in the world. And they had originally announced it as taking place on Gilbert, come on, buddy, a island that was formerly owned by the drug lord Pablo Escobar. So anyway, what happened was they raised literally millions and millions and millions of dollars to put on this festival. Now, I don't want to ruin the story, but it all went horribly awry. Just nothing about it worked at all. And it turned into a disaster of epic proportions. But and these two documentaries, again, you need to watch both to sort of get the full story. The Hulu documentary interviews Billy McFarland, the actual perpetrator and architect of this monstrous fraud. The Netflix documentary does not, but the Netflix documentary has a lot more footage of boots on the ground of what actually happened at the festival itself, the ill-fated festival, whereas the Hulu documentary has more background on Billy McFarland himself. So both of these documentaries work well together. I watched the Hulu documentary first and then followed up with the Netflix documentary. I think after watching them both back to back that there is not necessarily a proper way to order them. I think you have a better appreciation if you meet Billy McFarland. So I would tend to watch, if I did it, I would do it the same way again. I would watch the Hulu version first and then watch the Netflix documentary. But it got me thinking about a lot of things about our present culture. And I hark back to one of my favorite movies of the 80s, William Friedkin, who directed The French Connection and The Exorcist and Sorcerer, William Friedkin made a movie that came out in 1985. That was the first time that we ever saw William Peterson. Actually, William Peterson had a very small bit part in Michael Mann's 1981 movie Thief. And then, of course, he came back as FBI profiler Will Graham in the first Hannibal Lecter movie, Red Dragon, that was made in 86, or that came out in 86. Pardon me, it was called Manhunter. It was released as Manhunter, but it was based on the book Red Dragon. But before he was in Manhunter, he was a Chicago theater actor, and William Friedkin tapped him to famously play an FBI Secret Service agent named Richard Chance in 1985's To Live and Die in L.A., which starred Willem Dafoe and John Pankow and other people, Darlene Flugel. It's one of my favorite movies of the 80s. Wang Chung did the score. It's a searing cop thriller on the streets of LA. But on that Blu-ray, there is a documentary called Counterfeit World that was actually made by Bud Smith, who was the editor of that film, Friedkin's longtime collaborator, Bud Smith. And he talks a lot about both on the audio commentary and in that documentary about this idea of this counterfeit world. And my girlfriend has 2 teenage daughters, so I've seen now firsthand how teenage girls can react on social media, and I've been thinking a lot about the fact that one of the byproducts, we hear a lot about how the differences between boys and girls and how they relate to things on social media. Whereas, guys will band together and play online games, but then girls gravitate more toward to posting selfies and things like that, and how the levels of anxiety amongst teenage girls specifically has skyrocketed because of social media. And this whole idea of FOMO and what Billy McFarlane was trying to tap into and Ja Rule was trying to tap into is what I've come to believe is, in my own mind, I call it the counterfeit world. Like we are now living in a counterfeit world where people are basically creating through social media counterfeit versions of themselves, to the point where if you go back and you look at social media from 3 or 4 years ago, you might look at yourself on social media and realize I've been portraying a counterfeit, unreal version of myself on social media to make everybody think that my life is better than it is. And I'm guilty of this as well. I mean, whenever we're having a good time or you go somewhere, you take pictures and you put up selfies, and they're selfies that are curated. We're all only ever putting up the best pictures of ourselves and making us look like we're having the most amount of fun. Well, the entire FYRE Festival was built on, it's one of the purest examples of trying to create a counterfeit world that I've ever seen. And what's really interesting about the FYRE Festival is that they have this idea, and the idea of putting on a music festival and making it exclusive isn't inherently a bad idea. But what they did was they had this idea, they came up with it, and they're like, we're going to make it exclusive. And they went and they hired an ad agency, and the first thing they did was make a very expensive promotional video where they had influencers and models come to the Bahamas, and they were shooting all of this stuff that made it look like the greatest vacation you ever. There's yachts and planes and supermodels, and I mean, it was this incredible piece. And they used this piece to create the buzz online. They had a brilliant social media campaign. They had these, and I don't want to ruin a lot of the documentary, but they even had, at one point, to announce this to the world, they had all of these influencers all tweet out or put up on Instagram a picture of basically a fiery orange frame, like an empty frame of just this color, fire orange, and then with the hashtag, I guess, FYRE Fest. Brilliant marketing campaign, next level stuff. And then people started seeing these videos. So the FYRE Festival promised, I mean, you would get a beachside villa or mansion that you could rent if you paid $250,000 for a ticket. So they started immediately promising things. There were yachts. There was all kinds of stuff that you could get if you paid enough money. And it goes from there. And I encourage everybody to watch both of the FYRE Festival documentaries, but keep in mind how it's not just this. I thought that both documentaries were sort of a distillation of our world today, where everything has become, we live in a counterfeit world where it's not just people are screaming at the fake news media. We're moving away from science. The social sciences in campus on colleges today are, reality is the actual physical reality of the world is being denied. The old adage, my facts, the facts don't care about your feelings, all of these things. I mean, it really got me thinking. And FOMO, the fear of being left out. I mean, this idea, which is fear of being left out of what? Like, if you've missed out on an experience, if you missed out on it, does that mean your life has changed in any significant way? But watching these two documentaries really got me thinking about motion picture production, which is the thing that I have been involved in. It's the love of my life, and making movies is something that I've been professionally involved with this since the summer of 1989, when I received my first screen credit on the movie Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And when I was watching these documentaries unfold, the thing that was fascinating to me is a lot of people, movie making gets, I don't know, a bad rap. You hear a lot, I think, in the collective subconscious, the whisper stream of society. We hear that movies are somehow, I don't know, they can be, people are scamming, there's creative accounting, there's all kinds of, movie making does not ever get credit for being I guess you could call it a finely tuned machine. But I'm here to tell you that I have been on a number of, I've seen two major productions, the two biggest productions that I was on, I was back actually embedded in and watched from pretty much the beginning to the end, was Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Superman Returns. Now, both of those movies were made in excess of $200 million. And I was on set for both of those films for the duration of production. And I can tell you, both of those movies shared something in common, which was they were massive. They were gigantic productions. I mean, the biggest film productions you can imagine, with sometimes hundreds of extras. Actually, Chronicles of Narnia was even a bigger production than Superman Returns was. I mean, the end of Chronicles of Narnia, when they're shooting the final battle, we were at a place called Flock Hill in the mountains, outside, about an hour outside of Christchurch, up in the mountains, where there was literally thousands of people working every day. And you had to get up into the mountains. They had a fleet of helicopters, of Hueys, that were transporting men and women and equipment and makeup effects from the base camp that was giant. It was like a small city that was put up, and they would fly up the crew into the mountains to film the battle sequences. I mean, it was enormous. But there's Gilbert, it wouldn't be a podcast if Gilbert wasn't here barking. But the one thing that I marveled at on a daily basis, because remember, I had a camera in my hand and I was documenting the production of both of these movies every day, along with other members of my team. What I saw in the production of both of those movies were an incredibly well-oiled, well-produced, well-thought-out, unbelievable assault on logistics. And what I mean by that is, it was so well conceived of, and there were so many moving parts, and it was just enormously huge. And you saw that Hollywood, when it's working at the top of its game, which is pretty true for almost every major Hollywood film production. Some of you might not know, but after I worked on Leatherface, my first real regular job in the industry was I worked for the senior vice president of physical production at Warner Brothers, Bill Young. And our department oversaw the physical production for the studio of all of the movies Warner Brothers was making. Sometimes there was 10, there were 15, maybe even 20 motion pictures in production at any one time. Now, when I was there were two movies that I remember. One was Bonfire to the Vanities. Another was a movie called Nothing But Trouble. There's actually a great documentary piece on YouTube about the production of Nothing But Trouble. Gilbert, which you should look at if you can find it. But for the most part, Hollywood productions are unbelievably well-run concerns. And they're also one of the only places on earth where you can actually define, you can figure out how much, literally how much every second of time on a production costs. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're making a movie and your budget, you're shooting for 30 days. And each day of production, your budget is such that you know you're spending, let's just say $100,000 per day. Now, we know in production, because of union rules, that a production day is 12 hours. Now, it's usually, you have to break for lunch and everything, but you can actually back time, or however you want to say it, you can figure out how much every second costs, because how many seconds are in 12 hours? I'm not sure. But when you figure that out and you know that you have $100,000, you can figure out that each tick of the second hand, you're burning resources, which means that whenever you get, hey, buddy, he wants my attention, Gilbert. Yes, buddy. There he is, everyone. Gilbert, the Gilbarian from the planet Gilbar, is here. He's joining me. Do you want to come up here? You going to come up? Here, let's bring him up. There he is. He likes to come up. So here's Gilbert. He is a Bernedoodle. He's 25% Bernese Mountain Dog and 75% Poodle, and all awesome. But anyway, he likes to come up here and eat things. But anyway, so you can figure out how much 1 second of production costs, which means that when you get on set, the last thing you want to do is waste that time. You need to have especially when you're in a foreign country like Australia or New Zealand, and you are moving unbelievable amounts of men, women, equipment, everything, you need a team of people that are the best of the best. They are planning, they're logistical magicians, and they have spent months in advance before you ever get to a set, planning down to a T what happens. In the case of Superman Returns, we would do large scenes with extras in the middle of Sydney, Australia. There was hundreds of people, hundreds, if not thousands of extras sometimes, and hundreds of crew members. And you're watching all of those people work. And for the most part, what I have witnessed as far as Hollywood productions have gone throughout my life is an unbelievable attention to detail and an incredible whatever logistical nightmare you think you might be having, it's solved. Hollywood is very, very good at making films. Gilbert, stop barking, buddy. And as I watched this FYRE Fest documentary, these guys were promising from the get-go all of these things, whether it was mansions for people or yachts, or now these are things that all need to be acquired. And as you watch this documentary, there was never any sense after they promised all this stuff up front. Now, if you were going to plan some kind of a festival, you wouldn't market it until all of those things were locked down, until you knew what you were doing. And I watched this with my mouth agape, wondering, how can anybody embark on a project of this size and not understand that these logistics have to be taken care of first? And it just got me thinking as I was watching these two documentaries. I couldn't help but think about all the movie sets that I've worked on and watch them go off without a hitch. There's always some kind of hitch, but there's enough people and enough understanding that people, whether it's a weather problem, I mean, in New Zealand at Flock Hill, one day the entire standing set, which was a green screen set that they had for weather cover, blew off the mountain in this windstorm and into this ravine. I mean, it's gigantic. It's almost like a football field sized inside this big tent that whoosh went off the mountain. And they still persevere. They still move on. But the FYRE Fest, I mean, they had people working on these things, but there was nobody. It was all bogus. They had no idea how they were going to do this. And it really got me thinking about independent movies. And independent movies have a lot less production experience happening on them, because sometimes they're first-time features, other times they're monetarily, budgetarily challenged, so it's tough. And I've worked on, for the last 3.5 years, I've worked on a lot of these budgetarily challenged movies that really had no business going into production, but they had to, and for whatever reason. So I've worked on a number of projects lately that haven't been as well planned out as they probably should have been. Ironically, the project that has been the most, that has run like clockwork, is this short film, this proof of concept movie that I'm doing editing right now, directed and written by and produced by Lucas Kendall. And while it's taken a lot longer, we knew it was going to take a long time, but it's gone off without a hitch. There's new special effects coming in every day. But making movies is an enterprise that requires planning, and it is not rocket science, because they've been making movies for over 130 years now. So the idea behind making a feature film is something that is tried and true, and it's been tested over and over and over again. There are people that think they can always do it differently. For instance, I will tell you, if you're an independent filmmaker, you need 33% of your budget, 33%, to go to post-production, period. If you try and tell me that, no, I only have 25% or 20%, don't make your movie. Don't make your movie, because you can't finish it. If you don't have 33% of your budget, and by the way, it might not turn out being 33, it might be 30, it might be more, depending on how many visual effects you have. I'm telling you right now, if you want to make a movie, it's 33% of your budget goes to post, period. Don't even start. Don't tell me that, well, we'll figure out post. I'm already in a position right now where they didn't figure out post. The movie that I'm producing and editing right now, they didn't have nearly enough money for post. I wasn't involved in the inception of the project. I'm just the one that's now going to finish it and carry it over the finish line. But it's 33% of your budget. And I'll tell you one thing. Do you know what the first thing you all filmmakers out there need to start thinking about when you decide you want to make your movie? Here's the first thing that you need to know. The very first thing. How are you going to pay for the food to feed your crew? I'm telling you right now. Before you do anything, you have to figure out, how are you going to pay for food? Because the first thing that you need when you're making a movie is you need your crew with you, and you need them happy. And the only way to make your crew happy is if they know that the producers are taking care of them. So when they break for lunch, or you go into meal penalties or whatever, or crafty, which means craft service. Craft service is the table that you always have on a set where there's always food available. And on a craft service table, you need, here's a couple of things you have to have. You have to have fruit, good fruit. You have to have good coffee all the time. Now, anybody will tell you, well, you don't need, if you're going to not do that, don't make movies. Also, and like they should have thought about at FYRE Fest, because it became a big deal, you got to make sure that your crew has decent bathroom accommodations. These are basic things that people don't necessarily put first and foremost. I am telling you, when you are making a movie, your crew, first and foremost, needs to be taken care of, because they will be the first people that don't work as hard or as fast for you as you need them to work if they're not taken care of. And when it comes to every second and you're burning money, you don't want anyone, you want people to be jogging from place to place, not lethargically carrying cables. It can cost you 10 minutes, 20 minutes, might cost you 5 shots. And all you have at the end of the day is whatever you get in the can. And as anybody who's ever worked on a movie will tell you, especially any director or any producer or any editor, they always wanted to get that last shot they never got. So this idea of living in a counterfeit world and this amazing logistical fuck up that is the FYRE Festival. And you've got to look at this documentary. It's amazing. We in this country, and not to necessarily get political, but there's a guy I like to read a lot. His name's Jim Wright. He's a veteran. He writes under the title Stone Kettle. If you read about him, read or find him on social media. I really like his posts. Now, it's not just because we are on the same political side of things, but like he, for instance, talked about one of the things from emotion, again, from making movies. Every time I hear about some kind of big public works project, I think about it in terms of logistics. That's the first time, because I too have produced films. So you have to sit down and go, okay, well, how are you going to do this? And he had a great tweet about the wall that Donald Trump wants to build. And he was explaining from a logistical standpoint, you can't just build a wall and then leave it there. The only way a wall works is if it's manned. You have to have, there's got to be personnel on a wall. And there are countless examples of this throughout military history, that walls have never traditionally worked all that well when people want to actually get over those walls or under them or through them. But the idea of the logistics behind building something like that, the great thing is anyone who's involved in real estate or the construction of say a skyscraper, everyone knows how to do that. I mean, we've been building buildings for a long time. There's a way to do it, and they know how to do it. It's based on science and physics and metallurgy and all of those things. So there's no one comes in and tries to tell you, in this movie, you don't really need to spend 33% of your budget on the foundation or whatever the hell. They already know. They've got it. Movies, everyone's always, especially in independent films, they're always trying to tell you, we don't need this. We're going to do this anyway. And that's why sometimes making independent movies is usually turns out in some way, shape, or form to be a nightmare. But a lot of people won't need the work, so they put up with it. There's a lot of grumbling. But so these FYRE Fest documentaries have got me thinking about all of these things. What is this counterfeit world that we are living in? What does fear of missing out really mean? What are you missing out on? Another thing about movies that I think is very funny, when everybody I know who wants to get into movies, or like myself, having worked in the business, when you make a movie, I've said this before, if you don't like the actual act of making it and everything that goes in to making films, you shouldn't make movies. A lot of people get into the business because they want to have what they think is going to happen to them after they've made a movie. The accolades, the whatever it is you think you're going to get from the finished product. You're not going to get that. That's not what's going to happen to you. You're not going to change as a person because you've made a film. When I was directing for this TV show, this series called Femme Fatales, we had to shoot in, I'm sorry, there's gardeners working. We had to shoot every episode in 3 days. And at the end of every day, we were racing the clock. We had 12 hours. We were racing the clock, and I was directing. And if I would make my day, I would go back to the production trailer and think like, yeah, man, we made our day. What was happening when we wrapped and we made our day? People couldn't leave fast enough. Like I was always like the last one to leave. I'm standing around on this empty parking lot, with just the production trailers and everybody, the crew's gone. And I would always want somebody to be patting my back on, great job, Rob. We made our day today. No, it's just a job, man. The people that are working on motion pictures, it's just a job for them. And they want to please you. Everybody who works on a movie busts their ass to do the best job they can. But they already know they're doing a good job. That's why they're there. That's why you hired them. People who are working on motion pictures are working on motion pictures because they're good at their jobs. Because when people aren't good at their jobs, people say, oh, I had to hire so-and-so's cousin or whatever. That might happen, but I haven't seen a whole lot of that, because when you're actually working on a movie set, nobody has time for fools. Nobody's going to allow someone who's incompetent to continue working. It just doesn't work that way, because every second you're burning cash, and no one, no matter who you are, is going to allow that cash to be burned any faster than it needs to be. It's like the budget and time, especially time on a movie set, is the single most valuable thing that you have, even more so than your actors, because if you've got the greatest actors in the world, but it's going to take you too long to get the shots you need from them, they're being underserved, the film's being underserved. What you never have enough of on a movie set is time. And so watching these Netflix documentaries, I just sat there thinking, man, if they had thought about, rather than just thinking about creating FOMO, they wanted people to, they created the frenzy. Everybody was giving them all this money because they were appealing to a culture where fear of missing out is a big thing. But if they'd thought about the logistics first, let's figure out how we're going to put this festival on first and then sell the experience. If they knew that they had it covered, then they might have had something that could have been spectacular. They could have Burning Man, and you wouldn't be watching 2 documentaries on Hulu and Netflix about this failed, ridiculous non-starter of a music festival. But it made me actually happy that I've been afforded opportunities in my life to watch a business, to watch movies get made with clockwork precision, with many people that do a tremendous job. And that's kind of what I was thinking about today. I just want to talk about that. I know this is a little bit of rambling, but I was curious. What do you guys think? Did you see the FYRE Fest documentaries? And if you haven't, please do, and come back and comment. And what do you guys think about living in a counterfeit world? I mean, do we? What is reality anymore? Why is it that we only want to put our best selves? I mean, I don't want to go onto social media and hear what people, I don't like it when I'm listening to people talk about how depressed they are, things that happen. I admit that. But yeah. So anyway, I'm going to look at any super chat questions that have come in, and I appreciate those. Let's see. I got one on top. Mercer Create. Hello, Mercer Create. I'm from Mercer Island in Washington State. So when I see the word Mercer, I can't help but think of home. So thanks for that. The fate of the models built for trials and tribulations. Well, I actually kind of know the answer to that. Visual effects supervisor Gary Hutzel, that worked on Star Trek The Next Generation, and of course, the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, he took all of those models, the Greg Jean, there were 3 of them. There was a Klingon D7, there was the K7 space station model, and there was the 6-foot Enterprise model of the classic Enterprise that was built for those things. And Gary Hutzel had them in storage for years, and they were acquired by Alec Peters as part of Gary Hutzel's collection. But I don't know exactly who has them now, and I can't really talk about it because I know there's a little bit of the subject of litigation going on. But they are all 3 around, and they're beautiful. I have been in the presence. There's a picture of me on my Facebook page holding both the D7 and the Enterprise model, and they're all built by the great Greg Jean, so they were just as spectacular as you might imagine. So let's see. I saw somebody else had Alexander Wilson. By the way, Alexander, thank you for that, for the support. Alexander has a good question. By the way, I'm going to put on my reading glasses just because I'm a little far away from the screen here. So Alexander asks, what's your opinion on movies that are called production nightmares like Fantastic Four, and movies that reshoot a big portion of the movie like Dark Phoenix? That's a very interesting question. Now, look, first of all, you need people that know what they're doing to make all of these things work. And as logistical as you can be, you never know about the people that you hire. Now, I was not on the set of Josh Trank's Fantastic Four, nor was I on the set of Dark Phoenix, which Simon Kinberg, it was the first movie that he directed. He's been a producer. Now, I think that there's this idea that when you're making a movie that you're going to immediately collect, everything you make is going to be golden when you're producing these films. Now, I think that they've learned. I think Lord of the Rings was really the movie that I think set the tone for the modern blockbuster when they were making those movies in 1999 and 2000. When they were shooting those films, they famously shot all 3 of them together. but they had built into them what they called pickups, or we call them reshoots, but they were called pickups at the time, basically because of New Zealand tax laws. But they had built in a reshoot because, look, a lot of the time you can't always get gold as much as you're going through the film. Sometimes there are things that are revealed, maybe deficiencies in the script while you're shooting. So what they've done now in a lot of these larger movies, like the Marvel films, is they built into the script a time when you're going to come back and do pickups. So to me, in the modern day, doing reshoots and doing pickups is not something to be feared, especially on these tentpole films, because that's become de rigueur when you're doing this, because they know that you can't get everything you need as good as it can be, because during the editorial process things change, things are revealed as you move along. Even during the middle of production, you might think to yourself, wow, we needed something maybe that we've already shot that we're going to have to go back and revisit. But movies like Fantastic Four, it's very okay. When I worked in feature production, every single day after lunch in Hollywood usually would go from 1 to 2. When the executives would come back from lunch, they would spend the afternoon, 2:30 to 4:30, depending on, or even longer, and they would watch all of the dailies from the previous day's filming. And that was for all the movies that were in production. So the executives, they were supposed to at least watch all of the dailies on whatever films that they were covering every single day. And so the studio knew where those movies were at. Now, I don't know if that's still the case. I'm talking 30 years ago when the executives used to do that. I'm sure now people watch them online and, you're talking on the phone. I can't speak to what it was like now. But I think that there is still this idea that the production is, knows best. The studio doesn't want to necessarily get involved. And I can't, again, speak to what was going on with Josh Trank, but there was word of some shenanigans happening offset, and you need people. What happens now in Hollywood is that you get people that have one hit, and then they immediately get sucked up by the studio system to make you went from making $100 million movie, and then it becomes a hit or people like it, and then suddenly you're directing a giant tentpole property, which can be deadly if you've never worked up to that place. But Hollywood is so hungry now. I found the new music video director, so I'm going to give him $100 million tentpole movie. Well, no other business would this happen. You need to work up and you need to gain experience. And I think in the case of both Fantastic Four and Dark Phoenix, we have the case of perhaps inexperience might have played a part in both of those. I don't know. Or maybe they've decided to do something different with Dark Phoenix. I have no idea. I cannot speak to that, so I don't really know. But it's a very, very good question. But you need experienced people on every level, and I think now these directors who get sucked up early on in their careers might be a little out of their league, and that's probably a good bet to say that. But again, I don't know. I can't speak to that. Tom Bateman says, Rob, how about them Los Angeles Rams? I called it. Question if the Seahawks are the Jedi Knights of the NFL. Do you see the Rams of the Sith of the Empire? No. Okay, first of all, my buddy Tom Bateman spent years trying to get, as part of the group that wanted to get the Los Angeles Rams back to LA. And they did it. Tom, you guys did it. Not only did you do it, your boys are going to the Super Bowl after just a few short years. I mean, this is a success story to end all success stories. So good on you. But the Rams are not evil. The Patriots of the Empire. Tom Brady's a Sith Lord. Let's see what people are saying. Hello to Gilbert. Gilbert loves you all. Beatmaster says, now it's a fact, R&B is on fire. I am on fire. I was, again, fascinated by these documentaries. Carve out 3 hours and watch them. Let's see. Crixus Maximus says, I saw the Punisher version of the War Machine armor Frank would love having the wonderful toy. Guns, lots of guns. For those of you who don't know, you know I love Hot Toys, the greatest, the Ferrari of action figures, and they've announced a War Machine, the War Machine armor that Rhodey wears in the MCU movies. They're doing a Punisher version of that War Machine. It's non-canon, but it's awesome. Maybe it is canon. Maybe we're going to see that in Infinity War or in Endgame. Let's see. Captain Robert April says they should have brought Peterson back for Red Dragon. Edward Norton was not old enough for that part. Yeah, you know. Okay, what's interesting is, if you guys don't know, and every nerd does, but they've adapted Red Dragon twice. They adapted it, Michael Mann adapted it as Manhunter in '86, and then Brett Ratner came back and actually adapted Red Dragon again, where they had Hannibal Lecter playing. I mean, they had Anthony Hopkins coming back and playing Hannibal Lecter a third time, whereas famously the actor Brian Cox played Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter. So now they wanted to have the trilogy of Hannibal Lecter movies. You know, it's funny. I love Ralph Fiennes as Francis Dollarhide and Brett Ratner's version, but Michael Mann's Manhunter is such a Michael Mann film, whereas Brett Ratner's version of Red Dragon felt very generic to me. And William Peterson is the man. Sharpshooter 07 says William Peterson is the Beyonder. Maybe back in his younger days. I don't know about today. Vesna asks, are those documentaries made originally by them, or are they just streaming them? No, I don't know if one was made by Vice Media, but I think they're both one was financed by Hulu and one was financed by Netflix, I think, but I don't know. Bill Barkley asks, hi Rob, did you know about the Waterworld, the Ulysses cut officially coming to DVD and Blu-ray? Yes, for those who might be wondering what Bill is talking about, Arrow Video is releasing Waterworld, a special edition of Waterworld that has 3 versions of the film on it. And the Ulysses version, I believe, was some kind of even a fan-made edit, but they're putting it out. It's supposedly the most definitive version of Waterworld, using everything. And I'm really, really excited about seeing that. David Cabrera has sent me in a super chat question. David Cabrera says, first of all, thank you, David. He says, love these chats. Who are some of your favorite producers lately? Well, you know, I mean, my favorite producers, I think the people like, you know, Scott Rudin, and a lot of people, look, producers have a reputation of yelling and screaming a lot. And they do, because they're in charge of the money. I'm talking real creative producers who are in charge of finding the properties and then getting on set. I really liked Gil Adler, who I watched. He was the physical producer of Superman Returns. I don't know what he's doing now, but you know, again, Jerry Bruckheimer. You got to look at Jerry Bruckheimer, a creative producer who, interestingly, was a producer on Michael Mann's Thief in '81. He also was a producer, if I remember correctly, on Paul Schrader's Cat People. So yeah, he's pretty awesome. Let's see, what else do we got here? Vesta says, people used to believe everything what they saw and hear on TV 50 years ago. Nothing's changed. There's just more media involved. I think that's probably true, but the difference is, I think, you know, people had to check their sources. Now boots on the ground, and they don't have to check their sources anymore. You can just say anything like on the internet and people will start to believe it. And that's what we need to guard against. Dennis K7 1979, aka the Blue Corner, says, love the Narnia movies. Shame they couldn't continue back then. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I think, you know, the Narnia movies, especially Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, are beautifully made, but I think they're a little, they needed more. They needed to make them a little edgier, if that makes any sense. And how do you do that with the Narnia books? You can't really make them edgy. I think there was Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I mean, that they're about as good as they could possibly be. It's just that they didn't have the end of the world bent that the Lord of the Rings films have. Fluff Tongue asks, what franchise would you love to reboot? I'll go with Tron and then maybe The Last Starfighter. Yeah, those are good ones, although I like the original Tron. If you haven't seen it, I did a feature-length documentary on the making of the original Tron that you can find on that Blu-ray. Josh Crichton says, Rob, I'm thinking about making a couple of short films in the genre of sci-fi and horror. I'm thinking about going back to school for film production. as I think you should. Honestly, I think everybody in the world should make a movie and see how hard it is. And look, making films is a great exercise in learning how to work with a disparate group of people and the art of compromise. And it's also about the art of thinking ahead. And it's tough. Josh Crichton asks, Rob, are there any good sci-fi compilation books? Well, every year there's great compilations put out, like World's Best Sci-Fi. That's short stories. I love science fiction and horror short stories. World's Best Fantasy, the Mammoth Book of Horror. The Mammoth Book of Horror, they were putting those out for years. I love those. Robert April says Gilbert was trying to find himself a martini earlier, couldn't find the vermouth. Probably. I think I drank it all this weekend doing Rip with Rob. Jeffrey G says, I literally just paused your video from Saturday night. Ha ha ha. I just wanted to thanks for you and what you do. Watching your video on today of all days was positive reinforcement to a project that I've been working on and I'm getting out there later today. It could have been better time. Couldn't have been better timing. Also, I appreciated your mention of your girlfriend and her putting up with you. On that note, would you mind throwing out a shout out to my fiance, the one and only Miss Bonnie B? Cheers the next time you fill your glass. Listen, Jeffrey, I have to tell you, I everybody that asks me to give out a shout to people, I'm sure that you have the greatest fiance in the world. And I love that her name is Bonnie B. I mean, how could you go wrong marrying a girl like Bonnie B? You guys are probably going to have a great life together, and Bonnie B is probably going to be supportive of you. And I think it's terrific that you and Bonnie B are getting married. So good on you, kids, but I can't mention her. Can't do that. Sorry. Tell Bonnie B I'm sorry I couldn't mention her on the show, and that I couldn't talk about how she's going to be supportive of you for the rest of your lives together, and you better be nice to her. And remember, I'll tell you one thing about getting married. You have to accept this. And Bonnie B, tell Bonnie B I told you this. Remember, everything that happens is your fault. Just accept that now. It's your fault. And no matter what happens, just go, Bonnie, I know it's my fault, but let me help fix this. Just remember that. It'll work. Tell me. Sorry, though. Tell Bonnie I'm sorry I couldn't mention her. Schlabis says, Rob, have you ever worked on a movie that required performance capture? Yes. As a matter of fact, Chronicles of Narnia did. I mean, you saw people walking around with green screen tights, the centaurs and all that. There was all kinds of motion capture. James McAvoy's Mr. Tumnus. I mean, it wasn't full on motion capture because that technology was in the midst of and of course I worked on Lord of the Rings, which I mean I did other than interviewing Andy Serkis. I think I did more interviews about the creation of Gollum for the Two Towers extended version of Blu-ray. I mean, if you watch that piece on Gollum, I did like 99% of those interviews. The only person I didn't interview was Andy Serkis and Peter about Gollum, but it was amazing. Let's see. Crixus Maximus says Bill Barkley still listened to the Starfighter score. It's great. It would be awesome if they only upgraded. Oh boy, I have to say that the landscapers are here. Gilbert, buddy, it's okay, dude. Come here, dude. Come here. He's gonna go find out what happened. Man, he's how does a poodle bark like that? I don't know. Let's see. Josh Crichton says, Rob, I can't wait till HBO Watchmen series. I love The Watchmen. I think I've read The Watchmen in excess of 30 times. I don't know what this bonkers series is all about. My favorite character, Ozymandias. I love the balls on that guy. And I love the comedian. Beatmaster says, New Line Cinema is one of those with creative accounting. So many lawsuits for Lord of the Rings. Even Peter Jackson got robbed. Here's the thing about Lord of the Rings. I mean, it was different. It was not made under union. They made it they didn't have all the union contracts that they would have because it was made in New Zealand. So there was a lot of it wasn't so much just creative accounting. It was here's once again, kids, the biggest lesson in Hollywood, the biggest lesson I can impart to anybody. Here it is. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. That's it. Period. If it's not in your contract, you ain't getting it. Captain Robert Abel says, that's doggy for whose leg do I have to hump to get a drink around here? Aaron Johnson says, Rob, there's a scene in Bonfire of the Vanities that is hilarious that reminds me of A Few Good Men. The judge that Morgan Freeman plays tells the prosecutor, calm that crowd in the courtroom. Yes, it's Bonfire of the Vanities is a beautiful, beautiful mess. And boy, it's tough. It was hard to work on that. Power 543 fan film says, hey, Rob, still love that alien head next to you. Creepy is a potential understatement. Which version of the Alien 1 movie head is it? That's a good question. I'm not sure. This was made by the Hollywood Collectors Gallery. I think I got this in 2004, along with the Darkness, Tim Curry's Darkness from Legend. I got both of those things, I think probably from Sideshow. I mean, Sideshow made that Legend bust, which I gave to Spooky Dan Walker, who directed his first feature that came out called Sleigh Bells. So good on Spooky Dan. He stuck with it and made Sleigh Bells. Check out that. It came out on Blu-ray. Nerf Herder 21 says, watch the documentary on frogs yesterday. It was riveting. Dude, you should be ashamed of yourself. Sharpshooter 07 says, I don't think you can plan for what the weather is going to be from a logistics standpoint. No, but that's why you always have what are called cover sets. You have to plan that you can't plan for weather. So you have contingencies, and those contingencies are called cover sets. And you can we know what the wind is or the rain is usually going to be. So part of planning a movie is having those cover sets, which is great. Robert April says, wrap parties count as post. No, they count as production, and you need to make allowances for that. Shlabist says, Rob, will you be reading Cyberfrog when it's released? Sure, absolutely. Crixus Maximus says 33% to post regardless of genre, even rom-com. Yes, sir. 33%. Mike Bodden says RMB should do a film school series for people who want to make their own movies. This is golden. Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. So Crixus Maximus says some of the best food I ever ate was craft service. Yes, it depends what movies you're on, but yes, sir. Beatmaster says you can't be a no shit director. No, you cannot. Fluff Tongue says, still can't believe they haven't remade Inner Space Fantastic Voyage. Setting an adventure inside the human body would be awesome. You know what the problem with making a movie inside the human body is? There's no light. So it'd be pitch black. So every time you try to light something up, it's like you have to have the ship lighted. It'd be like the Enterprise from Star Trek The Motion Picture. It has to be without the stars. Let's see. Says the most important thing in any festival is a toilet. You can bring a sandwich with you, but if you have nowhere to pee, it's a nightmare. I was saying this today. I was saying that the first thing that I thought of, I was saying this before we went on to the John Campy show when I was live. I said, guys, you know what the first thing you have to think of if you're ever going to put on any festival anywhere? The first thing you have to think of is where are the bathrooms and how many are there going to be? That's the first thing. If you don't have that answer, you're dead. Bill Barkley says, "Oh, Rob, have you heard about Firestorm? Jerry Anderson's son is making it using puppets." Yes, I've seen footage on that. I love Jerry Anderson. I love Super Marionettes, and I'd love to see that. By the way, along with Bill Hunt, he and I wrote a big proposal to redo UFO. Big proposal that was with some producers that had an inn over across the pond. And apparently they didn't like our proposal, or they thought it leaned too heavily on the old show because it was in continuity. I beg to differ. Anyway, Future Doc 84 says, with video game cutscenes and shorts looking more stunning and sometimes delivering compelling stories, should video game companies just make their own in-house animated movies? Let me tell you something. Making great stories is very, very hard. Cutscenes are cutscenes, and they're easier. I think a lot of movies are taking bad things away from the storytelling. Movies now are becoming cutscenes, where I would dare say the Star Trek feature films suffer from that. There's a lot of cutscenes without the smaller emotional material that sort of makes stories resonate with people. But yeah, I mean, video game companies certainly have that technology. But telling a good, compelling story is really, really hard. And remember, you can skate by because the story, all you need is to hit these points, and then the gameplay takes over. So, those quiet human moments, the emotion, While cutscenes can be emotional, they're driving the story that gets you to the next bit of gameplay, which skates over. If you were just watching a cutscene movie, would it be that resonant? It would be cool, but maybe sometimes, first Injustice cutscenes are fun. I don't know. Clayton George says they don't call a triple golden overtime for nothing. Time is never less than crucial. You pay for it one way or another. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I mean, that's what real movie producing is. Time. It's logistics. It's managing your equipment and your manpower, and it's managing your time. Time is a fire in which we burn. Isn't that what Soren said in Generations? Nothing could be truer when you're making movies. Fluff Tongue says there should be a movie festival where the band's food, alcohol, and vibe is movie themed. White Russians at the bar, yo. Yes. Let's see. Well, Bill Barkley says, well, there's a video game movie coming this year, Monster Hunter, made by Paul W.S. Anderson, and his wife Mila Jovovich is in it. I hope it's cool. I mean, yeah, I'm always looking for good stuff. Let's see. What else has got people going? Classic example of a logistical nightmare, Woodstock. Yeah, people forget about all the mud and the crap and all that stuff literally that went on there. X Young Flame XX says, what's that alien thing? That alien thing is the alien. The original xenomorph, the big chap from 1979's Alien. Fluff Tongue asks if I've ever been to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, best arts festival in the world. Love to go. I have not been there, but I would love to go. Crixus Maximus says, wasn't on set, but I was at LSU when Trank was shooting. The crew I talked to universally said it sucked during filming. See, that's the thing. Crews know. And there's nothing more demoralizing than getting your... Here's another lesson for you kids who are thinking about directing movies. Do you know, as a director, you basically, how long you have to win your crew over? You have until lunch, the first day of shooting. Only until lunch, because the crew will know. Actually, the crew will know on your first shot whether you know what you're doing or not. Here's what I like to do. Here's my part of my process. I haven't got to use it very much, but here's my process. I will begin every single day on set where I will take my director of photography and my first AD, and I will do what's called walking the day. And I will take them usually before we actually are supposed to be on set, when people are still eating breakfast. I will walk the day with my DP and my first AD. The first AD has to know. And what we're doing is I explain everything I want to do that day, where I want to do it. I give them a quick rudimentary. I want to have the camera here. Let's try this. We're going to do this. So my director of photography is in my head, and my first AD understands where it is I'm going. Then my first AD can plan the day better. My DP knows, okay, we're going to start with this shot and come around and move here. And that way, once your director of photography knows what's happening, and once your first AD knows what's happening, which, by the way, is crucial. It is crucial before you start shooting that both of your two key team members know exactly, because the first AD keeps the day moving, and your director of photography keeps the day being shot. And when a first AD's team, when the grip and electrical department knows what's coming next, they can anticipate the next shot, where we're going, and it saves you time. And the first AD knows where we're going. Now, I reserve the right to, during the course of the day, to change things up if I see some changes being made, or if I see the actors doing something while we're blocking, doing a lighting blocking for the DP. If I see something interesting, I reserve the right to change this up. But you have to stay in constant communication with your director of photography and, most importantly, your first AD. A director's biggest ally, aside from the actors and your director of photography, is the first AD. You need a strong first AD when you're making movies. You really do. Make him or her your friend. They will save your life. Also, your script supervisor. Jack Lavelle says, hey, Rob, you frequently mention anime that you love. Would be great to see an episode more about your favorite anime. Some of my faves include Berserk, One Punch Man, My Hero Academia. Thanks. I have not seen My Hero Academia. I've seen a few episodes. I haven't seen enough of it. I really like it. I got to sit down and watch the whole thing. I mean, I was watching Knights of Sidonia the other day. I'm like, this is pretty damn good. I like it. It's not as good as my favorite anime of all time, Legends of the Galactic Heroes. Find it, know it, love it. Let's see. I'm getting to the end. I'm getting to the end here. Oh wait, there's more. I keep seeing more. Okay, Robert April says some Hannibal Lecter trivia. They tried getting Anthony Hopkins for Hannibal in Manhunter, but he was playing King Lear at the time, so Brian Cox got the part. I did not know that. I did not know that. Beatmaster says, by the way, Rob, was Enemy Mine a contender for your favorite movie starting with E? You know what? I have it on Blu-ray. It's pretty sought after Blu-ray. I have the Blu-ray. I thought about it. If you guys haven't seen Wolfgang Petersen's Enemy Mine, it's really interesting. It stars Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. as an alien. And it's pretty good. It's pretty good, but I didn't love it. Maurice Jarre did the score, and I didn't love it. It's good, though. Vesna says, Robert, I have a question about toys. I don't know where you're going to go with that. I've heard that there are some toys from movies that are not released yet. Can they do it? Isn't that a spoiler? Okay, so what Vesna is talking about is, obviously, when they're releasing merchandising for a movie, such as, Avengers Endgame toys that have been seen all over the internet, they have to, there's a long time where toys have to be designed and then they put them out. And usually they'll put out toys based on movies a couple of months even before the movie comes out. And as many people have noticed, as has been reported around the world, there have been Avengers Endgame figures. I'm not even going to say what they are, but there have been pictures of toys released on the internet for Avengers Endgame figures that are pretty big spoilers. So yes, it is a spoiler, and it's a bummer, but there's really nothing they can do about that, because most movies people don't care about as much as they care about Avengers Endgame. So when somebody like has pictures of the characters in suits that must mean they're time traveling through the quantum realm. Anyway, yeah. But I'll leave that for you guys to find out, because I wouldn't want to spoil that for you. Sorry. Dan Schmidt says, we're basically the same age, and listening to you talk about 70s toys, comics, and movies brings me back to the days when I saw Star Wars at the Fox Theater for $4.50. Yes, sir, Dan. And I bet you were the one that remembered the hydrocopter that Mego made that was part of the Micronauts collection, which I forgot. Captain Robert April says, did you see the MTV Movie Awards bit that Andy Serkis did where Gollum bursts in and goes on a rant? Yes, and it was great. Hands of Stone says, John Ottman's score for Superman Returns is underrated. He incorporated parts of Williams' original theme, but still made it very much his own. Couldn't agree more. And by the way, they've released a longer version of that score. Here's a little known fact. On the first version of the Superman Returns soundtrack CD that came out, I made a video. There's a music video on that disc introduced by Bryan Singer of the orchestra playing the Superman March that I filmed. It's really cool. I need to find that and put that back up on, although it'd probably get a YouTube strike against it, but I need to put that back up because it's great. DP Got Power says, hi, Rob, do you have any display posters? Yes, sir. As you can see right there, Han Solo from the Fast and the Furious, Justice for Han. I've got Han on my refrigerator. That's a display poster. And let me see. There's a Mad Max Fury Road display poster, and there's a Star Trek The Motion Picture. For those of you who don't know what Displate is, it's a company like Display and then a plate. It's a piece of metal with artwork on it. Cool, usually original artwork that's original to them. It's really cool with a magnet. So, and that's it's about like this big. They're really cool. I mean, how cool is that? They do a whole series of pictures of characters with cars, not just from the Fast and the Furious movies, but many different characters with cars, and they're awesome. And I had to get a Han. See, people wonder about this whole Han Justice for Han thing. Well, that's how much I'm into Han Solo. I've got Han Soul, like the city Soul. Oh, that was Sung Kang's character in the Fast and the Furious franchise. Somebody just sent me another super chat. James LH, thank you for the super chat, James. I see that's in English pounds. So he says, hi, Rob. I just bought a 3-disc Blu-ray of Waterworld. Includes a really good booklet and the Ulysses cut, which I've never seen. I love Arrow's discs, the way they come with their big booklets. Like I've got the Apartment, Billy Wilder's The Apartment. I'm dying to get that Waterworld set. I think it's awesome. And I see that there's a troll telling me to let's see. Yeah, I just took you out, buddy. It's always funny to me when people want to come in and be trolls. I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. Let's see. Going back up to see where we're at here. Where we at? Pre-live teacher says, greetings, Rob. Watchmen graphic novel is a timeless classic. What are your thoughts on Alan Moore's Miracle Man? Oh my God, I love Alan Moore's Miracle Man. If you guys haven't read Alan Moore's Miracle Man, he wrote it before he wrote Watchmen. Maybe he wrote a couple of issues later, but I think it's issue 15 of Alan Moore's Miracle Man, where Miracle Man has to go basically fight, well, a character that basically, this character is killing people and sticking their heads on pikes, and Miracle Man has to go fight that character. It's one of the greatest superhero battles ever put in a comic book, and it's amazing, and I would love to see that in a movie, but it probably will never happen. Future Doc 84 says, could technology get good enough and cheap enough for studios just to make their movies doing performance capture with their actors in a VR world in real time and compose the shots in post? They're doing it now. That is happening on Avatar, the Avatar sequels. They're doing that now, and it's going to continue to happen. Captain Robert April says, according to Paramount, Star Trek never made any money. No Paramount production has ever made money. Roddenberry said the real sci-fi is in the accounting department. Here's what people don't quite understand. So when a studio makes a movie, they charge off all of the overhead that it costs to run the studio. All of it, they charge it off to movies. So like all the payroll on there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people working on a studio lot. So what they do is every movie that gets made, they can charge the operational costs of the entire studio to each movie. And they can do it legally. I don't know how much they do that now, but yeah. Joseph Arak says, remember the end of Voyager episodes Year of Hell? Maybe something like that happens in Endgame. Timeline gets restored, and at one point in time, Thanos gets a call from his wife to take a walk and gets away from his snapping plans. Could be. The only problem with that is, and I don't think the MCU is going to do that, famously, the 2-part episode Year of Hell, the Voyager Year of Hell, which I really like, and Kurtwood Smith is a man who he's kind of like Nero, but smart. Nero from Star Trek 09. He's trying to save the people he's lost by changing the timeline and stopping this horrible thing. And every time he changes the timeline, it gets worse. And then famously at the end of the story, the timeline's restored and nobody remembered any of it happened. I don't think they'll do that. I think there's going to be some kind of time travel shenanigans, but there's going to be some sacrifice and people are going to remember what happened, I think. Beatmaster says, and Kevin Smith talked about how you have to sue to get your cut. It's common practice. Yeah, but you don't want to sue. The only time who makes money in lawsuits? The lawyers. Everybody else loses. It's stupid. Josh Crichton asks, Rob, what are some of your favorite sci-fi novels that are not Star Trek or Star Wars? Well, none of my favorite Star Trek or science fiction novels are Star Trek or Star Wars, but Dune, the original Dune, Children of Dune, the 6 Dune books that Frank Herbert wrote. But the first book especially, Dune is one of the great sci-fi books of all time. Dan Simmons wrote the Hyperion Cantos. I love Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion. I love Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. If you like Ready Player One or The Matrix, Snow Crash is one of the greatest books ever written about virtual reality. It's also one of the most wildly entertaining books you will ever read. The first page of Snow Crash will have you riveted. There's a science fiction novel that was written by Peter Watts in 2006 that was up for a Hugo. It didn't win the Hugo, called Blind Sight, that I'm sort of obsessed with. Actually any of Neil Stephenson's books. There's a really great, and why am I drawing a blank on? Well, one of my favorite science fiction writers is a Canadian writer. I call him the Stephen King of hard sci-fi because he writes sort of about the everyman. But Robert Charles Wilson is another, not Robert Anton Wilson from the Illuminati books, but Robert Charles Wilson. He's a great writer. Check him out, specifically his books Mysterium, The Harvest, The Chronoliths. He's written Darwinia. There's some great books that he wrote. Robert Heinlein, you got to read Stranger in a Strange Land. You got to read the classics, Ringworld, Larry Niven's Ringworld. And Larry Niven wrote a book. Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle wrote these together. They wrote The Mote in God's Eye, Lucifer's Hammer, and a book called Footfall. Well, Lucifer's Hammer is basically about a comet hitting Earth, and I got the book taken away from me in my 6th grade music class. I was so obsessed with this book, I literally couldn't put it down. And, when you're in the 6th grade, music was always kind of a bullshit class. You play 500 miles on the recorder or some shit like that. I hated music class when I was in elementary school. So I would take this book, Lucifer's Hammer. It was a thick paperback book. And I believe her name was Mrs. Ridenauer. Mrs. Ridenauer was our music teacher, and she took my book away. And like she took my copy of Lucifer's Hammer away and gave it to the principal, gave it to Boyd Matson, the principal. Boyd, his name was Boyd Matson. What a great name. It's like when Burgess Meredith is talking about characters from books in the Twilight Zone episode, Time Enough at Last. He would say, wasn't that a great name, Mrs. Macabre? But anyway, she took my copy of Lucifer's Hammer, and I couldn't get it back for like a week. I mean, you'd think they'd want you to read, but you can't read in music class. But The Mote in God's Eye was really hard to read. That book was some unreadable sci-fi, even though I finally read it. And Footfall was really good. So that's Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell. But read Gateway, Frederick Pohl's Gateway. That was a book I really remember loving when I was a kid. There's so many. I can't begin to tell you how many. I've got literally thousands of books in my Imaginarium that I'm going to put on camera eventually. Bill Barkley says, Rob, which version of the War of the Worlds tripods do you prefer? The original material look, Jeff Wayne's, Mike Trimm's version, or the ones from the Tom Cruise film? Okay. First of all, what Bill is asking here, Mike Trimm, the great Mike Trimm, is a designer and artist who worked on Jerry Anderson's UFO that to this day has some of the coolest hardware ever. And he famously, Jeff Wayne did a concept album, he told the whole story of War of the Worlds as a prog rock opera, basically, in the 70s. And there is a very famous painting of the tripods that Mike Trimm painted, which is awesome. But when it comes to War of the Worlds, my favorite, as much as I did like the Tom Cruise version, the Spielberg version, the original War of the Worlds from Byron Haskins, 1953 movie. And everyone's like, well, they're not really tripods. No, there are. You can see that there are the manta ray machines they're on a tripod of electromagnetic energy. Those are my favorite. The war machines in War of the Worlds, the original 53 War of the Worlds, are some of the coolest alien hardware tech ever put on movie screens, even to this day. I love those. Let's see. Captain Robert April says Burt Reynolds asked a lot of directors for advice when he started directing. Mel Brooks advised, fire somebody first day, keep a random guy up in the catwalk, fire him, keeps him in line. Bryan Singer felt that way too. He told me that as well. Future Doc 84 says, to go with your comment on how actors spend the shortest amount of time with a movie than anyone. With my limited experience in sets, actors are also the biggest bubble on productions too. Yeah, I mean, the thing about actors is actors do a very different thing than the rest of a movie crew. They show up, they do their lines, and they leave, where a movie crew has to continue on day after day after day after day. And actors do come and go. I mean, when I worked on Superman Returns, we were shooting from March through October into November, and Kevin Spacey was only there for 6 weeks playing Luthor. Josh Crichton says, Rob, one of my passion projects is to make a Pat Benatar biopic. Do you have any passion you would like to do? I do. I've got a couple of projects, but I'm not going to tell you what they are because I still hope to make them. I will say this. They're based on books, though. They're based on books. Bright says, did you hear that Guillermo del Toro was offered 7, but he turned it down? I've never heard that. That's very interesting. Let's see. Wow. Okay. Anyway, Steve Henry comes back with more trolling. I love blocking people. That's kind of fun. You can just make them all disappear. That's fun. Haskell 420 says, hi, Robert. Good afternoon. Sorry I'm late watching and sharing your video on Twitter. And thank you for liking and retweeting my sharing of the John Campy show earlier today. Well, thanks for the support. You're always kind to us. I appreciate that. Future Doc 84 says, I feel like some of the best storytelling in Star Trek is the episode in TNG with the probe that has Picard live an entire life, the one with the flute. It's called The Inner Light. It's from the 5th season. It was written by Morgan Gandel. And yes, it's awesome. That is a great episode of the show. And Marvin Rush's photography in that episode is amazing. Clayton George says, as far as superb science fiction that is also wildly funny, I'll just say one name, Spider Robinson. Oh, yes. Got to read Spider Robinson books. There's great. I mean, there's so many great science fiction novels. I could probably give you a list of 200. Yeah. Norman Lau says, sounds like Wojtek Dolinsky from 3 O'Clock High. If you guys haven't seen Phil Joannou directed Rattle and Hum, but Phil Joanno's first movie, he was a Wunderkind. He directed a movie called 3 O'Clock High that stars Casey Siemaszko and Richard Tyson. It's great. It's one of the great teen comedies of the 80s. It's also very stylish, and it doesn't get enough love. It does not get enough love. Haskell 420 says, if Steve's being hateful, spamming, etc., put your cursor next to his name, report him. Yeah. He's reported. Let's see. James H with another super chat. Wow, James, thank you. Coming back from the UK. James says, loved Star Trek the Motion Picture when it came out as a kid. In the 90s during film studies, watching Citizen Kane, seeing Rob Wise was the editor, loved finding things out about films when I grew up with. Okay, for those who don't know, the great Robert Wise, who directed Sound of Music, The Andromeda Strain, West Side Story, Curse of the Cat People, he directed Star Trek the Motion Picture. And he was an editor on Orson Welles' Citizen Kane. And Star Trek the Motion Picture, I was lucky enough to meet Robert Wise. I actually went to a screening of Star Trek the Motion Picture when they started with him at the Directors Guild, when they started, when Darren Dochterman and Dave Fine and that team started on the director's cut of Star Trek the Motion Picture. I want to say it was 99. There's a picture of it on Darren Dochterman's YouTube page of all of us standing with Robert Wise. It was amazing. It was amazing to talk to Robert Wise. And that was actually, I'll tell you a funny Robert Wise story. So growing up in Seattle, when I was in high school, Stanley Kramer, who directed movies like, I believe he directed Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and On the Beach. He was a very issue-oriented filmmaker. He was teaching a film studies course at Bellevue Community College. And I had a math tutor. Because I wasn't very good at math. I needed a tutor. And my math tutor knew Stanley Kramer. And one day, Stanley Kramer called me up, called me at home. And I wasn't even in college yet. This was at the community college. Because you need to come to my film program. And he would have guests up. Oh, he also Stanley Kramer famously made It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, if you haven't seen that. And he would bring guests. And he brought Robert Wise up to speak. I'm in high school, and I got to go. I took my Star Trek the Motion Picture one sheet up with me, and he signed it. And I unfurled it, and he just looked and he sighed. He was like, "This one." That's what he said. This one. He wasn't happy. I mean, of all the movies, I brought that up. But he signed it. He was very gracious, and it was great meeting him. He was like a big teddy bear, a big white-haired teddy bear. What a nice guy. Let's see. Josh Crichton says, if John Campy is the Burgess Meredith version of the Penguin, then you, Rob, are old man Bruce Wayne from Batman Beyond. I love it, man. I would love to be the old Bruce Wayne. Who's my Terry McGinnis? Oh, Timothy Chalamet. He's my Timothy Chalamet who's playing Paul Atreides in Dune. He's my Terry McGinnis. David Cabrera says, I just saw the new IO movie on Netflix. Did not enjoy it. Have you had the chance to see? Yes, sir. I watched it last night. I loved it. Now, for those who don't know, it's a very quiet, slow, melancholy science fiction movie, essentially about the end of the world. And it's a 3-character piece. It stars Anthony Mackie, and it stars Danny Houston, who's John Huston's son, who sounds more and more like his dad all the time, and a girl, I don't remember her name, the actress's name. But it's a very slow, quiet, almost a chamber piece. I loved it. I thought it was melancholy, and it cast a spell, and it's on Netflix, and I want to see. I thought it was beautifully made. It was actually shot in France, and a lot of it takes place on this mountaintop with his observatory, and not a whole lot happens. But if you like Tarkovsky movies and stuff like that, I liked it. Anyway, yeah. Let's see. Robert April says, my understanding is that in conjunction with the DVD release of the motion picture, Wise invoked his contract that guaranteed him final cut, and that's how he got the director's edition. I don't know about that. I don't know if that's true. That I'd like to believe that's true. Crixus Maximus says it's a mad. Oh, it's a mad. It's a mad. I think it's 4 Mads. One of the world's funniest movies. I agree, although it's a little dated. It's a little dated. Mike Bodden says he loved I.O. So did I. I really loved it. I mean, I would love to have made a movie like that. I hope people watch it. Let's see. Oh, Steve F said, I thought it moved way too slow. I couldn't get past the first half. No, it truly is. And as I've talked a lot about in my favorite movies series, of which I am up to F. I've got to do Fs soon. I like those slow, brooding films. I kind of let them wash over me. You got to put yourself in a mindset. Gilbert is certainly a busy boy today, aren't you, Gilbert? But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was beautifully made, and I just love the spell it casts. I kind of sat back, and it reminded me of it has nothing. One of my favorite science fiction movies ever is the 1979 PBS produced version of Ursula K. Le Guin's book, The Lathe of Heaven. Oh, another favorite science fiction novel I love is Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness. You got to check that out. Anyway, yeah, but Steve, you know what? You're not wrong. It did move slow. It was very brooding, and I get that, but it's it's slow. Josh Crichton says, Rob, I want to get the Black Widow hot toy from Avenger Infinity War. It's $220. Should I get it? Here's the thing. I tell people about hot toys. You're looking at 200 plus bones. If you love the character, you know, the thing about Black Widow is I think they've made 6 Black Widow figures. I have the last Black Widow figure I bought was the Winter Soldier, when she had the longer hair. But I really want to get the Age of. See, what I do is I only like to have like one figure, like my favorite Black Widow figure. So I have that figure because I've traded one, or you sell them and then you buy the new one. And because Hot Toys really don't go down in value much. But I think I want to get the Age of Ultron Black Widow figure because I only need one. Bill Barkley says, Rob, do you remember the old sci-fi film Doppelganger, or AKA Journey to the Far Side of the Sun? Love that movie. I have the Blu-ray. Now, that's interesting. So this is a late, I want to say it's 69, 68, 69. It might be 70. So Jerry Anderson, who produced Space 1999 and UFO and the Super Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet and Stingray, which is in the new Aquaman. There's a clip from Stingray. He produced a feature film it's called Doppelganger, aka it was released in the United States as Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, because Americans don't know what the fuck doppelganger means. But basically, it's about a mirror Earth. An exact duplicate is found on the other side of the sun from the Earth, and so a mission is sent from our Earth to the mirror Earth to see what's there. I really love that movie. When I was a kid, it used to blow my mind. I couldn't. You've got to check it out. It is on Blu-ray. I really like it. That's a good question. Everybody should see. That's one of those movies that I loved growing up that a lot of people don't know. There's a lot of great science fiction movies in the late 60s and early to mid 70s that people haven't seen. And Doppelganger is one of those movies. It's great. Clayton George says, forgive me, but I must ask, any news on a sequel to Free Enterprise? Please don't hurt me. I'd never hurt you. So many of you know that I wrote and directed this movie that's celebrating its 20th anniversary, God help me, this year, Free Enterprise. And the last time it was ever released on home video was 2006. There's a shitty version of it that's streaming that I'd love to take off streaming, but I don't have the rights to the film, even though I co-wrote it. I directed the film and edited the film, and it stars William Shatner. Back in 2010, we were 2 days away from shooting the sequel that was called not Free Enterprise 2. It was just called Free Enterprise, The Wrath of Shatner. I would dearly love to make that movie still. I've got, hopefully I'm working on some things to see if I can get the movie to come out in 2019. A new version. I want to do like Oliver Stone did his ultimate version. I want to do the ultimate version of Free Enterprise because there's things I want to change. But I really like the script that Mark and I wrote for Free Enterprise, The Wrath of Shatner. It's really funny, and it's a romp around the world, actually. Dennis K 1979, aka the Blue Corner, says, saw the Criterion edition of It's a Mad World just a few days ago. First time I saw the full extended edition, I thought it was too long and not as funny as I remembered. You're not wrong. It's a rough slog, but I love it. Yeah. Future Doc 84 says, do you think Marvel will make a Thor 4? Or are they ready to move on? I think they're going to make a Thor 4. I think Ragnarok totally reinvigorated the Thor franchise. And look what, I mean, Thor was so badass when he shows up with Stormbreaker at the end of Infinity War. It was great. Let's see. Wake me up for when you get there, huh? Rob, I know you have a fetish for hot toys and chairs. What about a Mr. Glass in a wheelchair if they made it? I would love to get a Mr. Glass, but he's got to be in his Prince outfit, his purple Prince outfit. I'd love to get that. Yeah. Jack Lavelle says, Rob, is your F video going to be all Fast and the Furious films? No, but I am going to put Tokyo Drift in there. Pre-live teaser says, Rob, you should do a live stream on movies made ahead of their time, Blade Runner, Unbreakable, Shawshank, etc. That's not a bad idea. I like that idea. I thought that was cool. Free Enterprise 2, The Wrath of Shatner, let's crowdfund it. No 2, though. We can't crowdfund it. We need too much money. We'd never make enough money, and we could never crowdfund it until we had William Shatner on board, and you have to pay or play him. Beatmaster says, Rob, by the way, Mark Zacree said he would be game to have you on his channel. I think a meeting show with you guys would be interesting. I like Mark. I've been a fan of Mark Scott Zacree's since, I want to say in the early 80s. One of my favorite books I had when I was younger was Mark Scott Zacree's Twilight Zone Companion. I think I've been through like 4 copies of that book. I loved the Twilight Zone, and I needed to know everything about it. If you love the Twilight Zone, the original Twilight Zone, the Rod Serling created Twilight Zone that ran from 1959 to 1964, one of the greatest television shows ever made. And if you want to learn how to tell a story, the Twilight Zone is your show. He wrote the greatest book on it, the definitive tome. Let's see. Nay says, you work in Metropolis. That's cool. What do you do? This, you know what this is? I'll tell you what this is. This is actually the crew. I keep forgetting this. This is one of my oldest pieces of clothing I own. I love it. It's so comfortable. It's been washed so many times. This is my Superman Returns crew hoodie. I think you can see on the back here. You can see that it says Crew 2005. Yeah, this is my actual crew hoodie. One of the great benefits of working on movies is when they give you swag. There's people I haven't raffled it off yet, but I had these made for the crew because Warner Brothers didn't do it. Me and director Dave Parker paid for these awesome hats, these badass baseball hats, to get made for the crew of The Hills Run Red in Bulgaria. I had these made in LA and shipped to Bulgaria on my own dime because Warner Brothers wouldn't give anything to the crew. It was this low budget, direct video horror movie. I thought it was important. It helped morale, and we spent like $4,000 on these. I'm auctioning this off for people who donate to my channel. I have this. I'm auctioning it off. It's the last one I have. It's never been worn, but I love swag. Robert Abel says, wait until after the Paramount CBS merger. They might be more amenable. I don't know. Steve F sends in a super chat. Steve, thank you. I appreciate that. No question. So I owe you an answer. But I would love to go on Mark Zacree's channel. Crixus Maximus says, your Inglorious buddies do a good chat and great bird. Oh my God. Okay. For people who don't know this, I do a podcast called Inglorious Trexperts that Mark A. Altman and Darren Doctorman thought up. And this week's podcast that you can hear wherever podcasts are available, on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, we kick off our year-long celebration of this year, the 40th anniversary of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, December 7th, 2009. Star Trek: The Motion Picture celebrates its 40th anniversary, but we're going to be doing pieces about. Our first piece was is about the novelization of Star Trek, the motion picture, that contrary to popular belief, Gene Roddenberry, yes, in fact, did actually write the novelization for Star Trek, the motion picture, which means it's canon, and it's bonkers. I mean, in the novelization, he talks about how people on Earth, like Kirk's mother and mother, had love coaches, and there's transhumanism. It's crazy. It's awesome. And Darren Doctorman does a selected readings doing impressions of both Gene Roddenberry and Shatner and Nimoy. It's hilarious. So that's what Crixus Maximus says. That's what he's talking about. That was all Darren Doctorman. But apparently his Persis Kambata is not so good. Nathan Etienne sends in a super chat, and he says, thoughts on The Man Who Killed Hitler and then Bigfoot trailer. There is a movie coming out that stars Sam Elliott, the great Sam Elliott, called The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then Bigfoot. And I think it's on Netflix now. It's coming to Netflix, maybe. And basically, Sam Elliott plays a guy, I guess, in World War II. He was the man who really killed Hitler. And then he gets, I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen the trailer. And according to the trailer, he gets tapped to find Bigfoot, who might be the disease vector for this horrible virulent Ebola-like plague or something. And so he's sent out to hunt down this Bigfoot and kill him. Nathan, I've heard it's great. It looks bonkers to me. I will watch anything that Sam Elliott is in. For those of you who don't know, Sam Elliott's the guy with the big mustache and the great voice. He's in Star is Born, and he's in, of course, The Big Lebowski, and he's been in a bunch of other movies. But he's great. Love Sam Elliott. Steve F says you can find season 4 of The Twilight Zone on Hulu. Only season 4? Okay, here's the problem with season 4. You know why Hulu got season 4 of The Twilight Zone? Well, Twilight Zone ran 5 seasons, and 4 of those seasons, each episode was a half an hour long. The 4th season of Twilight Zone, they went to an hour-long format, and there's only a few episodes in the 4th season that are great. One of them is an episode called On Thursday We Leave for Home. And I think James Whitmore, is James Whitmore, who's in Shawshank Redemption, is in that episode. Yeah, so that's probably where they have it. Captain Robert April says, Rob is the movie critic for the Daily Planet. Oh, another one of these. Yeah. I always find it funny when people come in and want to talk religion on my channel. Like, that's okay. Something just fell. Yellow Flash says, R&B, what were your thoughts when Ben died in Robotech Macross? It happened literally the episode right after Roy Fokker dies. Dude! I can't believe I just read that. Don't listen to anything that Yellow Flash just says. I'll tell you what, it sucked. See my Roy Fokker helmet right there? That's my Roy Fokker helmet. How do you think I felt about the deaths? It's terrible. Terrible. But anyway, everybody should watch Macross. Macross is on, or Robotech, but Macross is on Netflix. Vesna says, I think that Chris Hemsworth is preparing for something. He's still building his muscles up. He's still building his muscles up. I don't know how it's even possible. I don't know either. He is one crazy person. IMDb says you worked on the movie Sleepwalkers. Does it? I didn't know that. Yes, I did. I did work on Sleepwalkers. I didn't think that was part of my resume. I worked for a special effects makeup company, Tony Gardner's effects makeup company. It's is that Gilbert eating something? I don't know. It was called Altarian Studios, and Altarian Studios, while I worked there, I worked on Cast a Deadly Spell. I worked on the Swamp Thing television series. I worked on Sleepwalkers, and I worked on Army of Darkness, which I do actually have a screen credit on. And I used to see Machen Amick every morning. What I did was specifically on Sleepwalkers, I brought we had to bake new prosthetics like on faces and things like that. What's going on in there? Is that Gilbert? No. So I had to bring all the prosthetic pieces every day to the set. I had to drive from our office in Irwindale where they were getting made and baked. When I say baked, literally they were baked in an oven and all the monster prostheses I had to take to set and make sure our effects team that was working on set had them. So yes, that's what I did on Sleepwalkers. Captain Robert April says, I don't even think Roddenberry considered the novelization of TMP canon. He made $400,000 to write it, though. You can hear all about it on this week's episode of Inglorious Trexperts. Oh, Fluff Tongue asks if I've ever seen Garth Marenghi and Dark Place. Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. It's hilarious. If you haven't seen Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, everybody should watch it. That, and I think Gilbert was, in fact, tearing something apart. Let's see. Oh, the light covering the kitchen fell. Oh, that happens all the time. Aaron Johnson says Sam Elliott is also recognizable in the movie Gettysburg. Yes. James Whitmore. Oh, Captain Robert April says, want a good Sam Elliott, James Whitmore flick, an old TV movie, I Will Fight No More Forever, about Chief Joseph and Nez Pierce. I'll watch that. I've not seen that. Rob, have you seen the trailer for? Oh, that's what I just answered. Yeah, I was just talking about that. Jack Lavelle says, Rob, have you heard that there's going to be a Sentry and a Moon Knight series on Disney Plus? I have not heard that. If that's true, I will dance for days. Josh Crichton says, Rob, thoughts on the movie Evolution? Are you talking about the Evolution movie that Ivan Reitman directed? The one with David Duchovny? If that's the one you're talking about, it was not as good as I thought. Super chat from Ron Hall. Ron, how are you? Thank you for that. Robert, my geek brother, my directors, Mount Rushmore, Steve. Oh, okay. This is good. So, okay, Ron Hall sends in a super chat. Thank you for that. He says, Robert, my geek brother, my director's Mount Rushmore is Steven Spielberg, Sergio Leone, Chang Cha, is it Chang Cha? And Beat Takahashi. That is a great bunch of people. Very international of you. Wow, what's yours? Okay, if I have to pick my director's Mount Rushmore, if I'm being put on the spot, I'd have to say probably Billy Wilder, Stanley Kubrick, Akira Kurosawa, and probably Francis Ford Coppola. I don't know. But I'd change that every day probably. Nay asks, am I mad or glad about the Rams? That's a great question, Ron. Now you've got me thinking. I'm like, I'd have to do different genres of movies because I love Wong Kar-wai. If you haven't seen Wong Kar-wai movies, I love Wong Kar-wai. That's a tough one. I'm glad about the Rams. I think it's great. Ordering my first bootleg Hot Toys Iron Man Mark 46 tomorrow. Don't order a bootleg Hot Toys figure. Don't do that. That's like ordering those bootleg Lego sets from China. No. Tom Bateman says, Crixus the high ground. Yeah. Let's see. DP Got Power says, I heard the Loki show is only Tom Hiddleston narrating and not starring, but I don't know how valid this news is. I don't know if that's true. We didn't say that on the John Campea show this morning. I was there. Bartomac from Ireland is here. He says, my Mount Rushmore has John Ford, Wells, and Kurosawa both looked up to him. My Rushmore is John Ford. Wells and Kurosawa both looked up to him, even stole from him, which I'm with love, I'm sure. Yes, John Ford was one of the great directors of all time. He was great. Dennis K. 1979, a.k.a. the Blue Corner says, yeah, order Lego from here. Denmark, the home of Lego. Dude, I was in Denmark 6 years ago for New Year's in 2012. Man, do you guys do it right. Oh, I love New Year's Eve in Copenhagen. Fantastic. I love Denmark. It's great. Hands of Stone said, did you watch Space 1999? What do you think of it? Dude, I have the network set, the Blu-ray set of all Space 1999. I love the first season of Space 1999. The second season, not so much. But I like it. And of course, the Eagle Transporter, which I have an Eagle Transporter model right there that my mom actually got me. It was a special edition model I found on sale for like $68. It's 22 inches long. My mom bought that for me for the holidays. I love Space 1999. The Eagle Transporter is the greatest. Let's see. What do people got going here? Rob, I heard that Hush, the Riddler, and the Court of Owls, along with the Penguin, could appear in the Matt Reeves Batman movie. That seems like a lot. I don't know, but they probably all could. I don't know. I love the Court of Owls story. Yellow Flash says, R&B, sorry for the Robotech questions. I was just kidding, man. I was just kidding. Another super chat question from Brandon Venezuela asks, did you and John Schnepp have anything in the works? We did, actually. For those who don't know, the great John Schnepp, who passed away last July, I was on Heroes with him for 3.5 years. I did Collider Heroes with him for 3.5 years. And I did. John and I were talking about doing a couple of different shows. Like we had talked about a show where we would take like 3 movies of the same genre and talk about them, compare and contrast them, kind of like an appreciation slash, not really a review show, but more like exploring how does, like, the vampire genre. We'd take a vampire movie from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and then talk about them. And we were going to shoot this show at the American Cinematheque, the Egyptian theater that's the home of the American Cinematheque here in LA. And we were going to do that show, and we were going to do other shows, but that was the show we kept talking about the most, was going back and doing that, which I was really into that idea. I mean, maybe I'll resurrect that idea in some way, shape, or form. And then John wrote a story for me for an anthology series that I'm trying to produce. He wrote a great story for me, and hopefully I will have somebody one day able to realize that story, which would be fantastic. William Mann says, I found you and the podcast Inglorious Trexperts. I was happy to hear you guys mention covering Star Trek V later this year. I have an unexplained love for that movie. What are your thoughts on it? Well, you have to know that Star Trek V, directed by the mighty Shatner himself, there's even a joke about that in Free Enterprise. I have actually Shatner's early treatment for that, which I actually think would really work. I think, unfortunately, he was forced. Star Trek V doesn't have an ending. They pulled money away from him. So there's really no ending. There's no satisfying ending to that film. And I think the humor is forced. Because of Star Trek 4, they're like, well, you've got to make this funny, when really it was a thoughtful movie about family and sacrifice and love. And I think there's a lot of great character moments in Star Trek, but it's hampered by the dumb comedy. The worst kind of comedy is comedy that happens at the expense of your characters. Like when Scotty says, I know this ship like the back of my hand, he bumps and he hits his head on a pipe. It just knocks him out. That was not good. I hate comedy that is at the expense of characters. I like situational comedy. Josh Crichton with a super chat says, how did I meet Schnepp and Holly? You know what? I don't remember how I met Schnepp. I remember him because I started seeing him around at different events and things. Like, you can't live in LA and go to various geek events and Comic-Con and not see people. I mean, John was definitely a fixture at those kinds of events. And that's how I met him. And then we became more friendly, and I visited him when he was at Titmouse working on Metalocalypse. And he really knew people that were involved in the comedy scene in LA. And then I probably met Holly with John. And of course, I was in their movie, The Death of Superman Live, What Happened. And then I was helping John and Holly with their show. They were doing a show called What Happened, the series version of their movie. And I helped them with the Logan's Run episode. That we went to Bryan Singer's house and spent all day with him, and I got them some of the storyboard artists and the people that worked on the unmade Logan's Run. Bryan was directing. But yeah, I knew John, I want to say, for about 20 years. And then he called me up and asked me to be on Heroes. And I thought it was just going to be a one-off thing, but we worked really well together, so they kept me on the show. And I was on it from April of 2015 through July of 2018 until he passed away. Robert, what's your most anticipated movie in February? I gotta go with Alita Battle Angel. I can't wait to see. Cameron was trying to make that movie for like 15 years. Now he made it. I can't wait to see that. Hands of Stone says, where did it come from that Will Decker is the son of Matt Decker when it's never mentioned in Star Trek the Motion Picture? I believe it's in the novelization. I think it's in the novelization, but maybe it's not. I think it was. Robert April says Schnepp is definitely someone that would stand out in a crowd, even if he was just standing there with a snow cone. And Schnepp would have been the guy standing there with the snow cone. What's up, son? You know, would have eaten the snow cone. No, he was one of the greatest people I knew. And I've said this before. One of my favorite things about John Schnepp is he reveled in the creativity of other people. He was never threatened by what anybody else was doing. If you were doing something cool, he was the first person that would be like, dude, you know, fist pound. He loved the creativity of others. You know, he relished if he found somebody who did a cool t-shirt, you know, some geeky shirt online, he'd be the first person to buy it and talk about how great it is. And, you know, he was always like me, he was always finding something to be excited about and something that, you know, was cool. There was always something, John, like me too. We were like kids in the candy store. We were always looking forward to something. And it was that was I miss him. I miss the big guy. He was a tremendous loss, I have to say. Captain Robert April says Will Decker being Matt Decker's son is a part of his backstory going back to phase 2. Yeah, that might be true. If you guys want to read another fascinating Star Trek book, read the Reeve Stevens book on the Lost series, Star Trek Phase 2. It's great. Mark Altman and Ed Gross wrote a book about that as well. But the Reeve Stevens book is the definitive look at the unmade Star Trek series that was later then repurposed into Star Trek the Motion Picture. I think that's the end of these questions, guys. I think that's the end of this chat. Thanks for listening to me ramble and talk about the Counterfeit World and the FYRE. You guys watch the 2 FYRE Festival documentaries. Check those out. You'll dig them. And it's great. Thank you once again, all of you, the members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating in these chats. And a great big thank you to everybody who sends me those super chats. It keeps me on the air. It keeps me going, which is great. Listen to the Inglorious Trexpert podcast. I think you'll like it if you like Star Trek. It's wildly entertaining. And we do it. Here's a piece of trivia for you. We record the Inglorious Trexpert podcasts at the offices of Dean Devlin, who produced Independence Day and the original Stargate and the American remake of Godzilla, the first one. We do that in his office. He makes that possible for us. They're really well produced. They're really great. Clayton George says, I have to say it one more time, Mike Jitlove. That's a blast from the past. I was going to end, but I got it since you brought up Mike Jitlove, who lived on Maltman Avenue. He probably still does, over by my friend where Steve Melching used to. Mike Jitlove was a independent filmmaker and an incredible stop motion animator who I actually met. I met Mike Jitlove. I had a lot of his movies, bootleg versions of them on videotape when I first got a VCR. My friend Steve Pitcher hooked me up with Mike Jitlove's movies. Although when I met him, he wasn't so happy that his movies were getting bootlegged on video. But Mike Jitlove actually made this great short film called The Wizard of Speed and Time that was later turned into a feature film. But whenever somebody brings up Mike Jitlove, I'm like, hey, you have to say it one more time, Clayton George. Let's say it one more time, Mike Jitlove. But anyway, so thank you for being here. And I want to say thank you for everything, the super chats. And I'm going to sign off with my sign off because I have to say this. I didn't say this yesterday. I said it in the middle of the podcast, but I'll say it now. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have not heard. All you have to do is listen. Thanks for that. And another super chat. Brandon Venezuela says, Brandon Valenzuela, like Fernando Valenzuela. Heroes isn't the same without you. While I'm here. Well, thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate that. I do a show with John Campia called The Weekly Hero. We are back. Tweet questions to us. We're back weekly on The Weekly Hero. So yeah. And I'm talking to Kevin Rubio as I'm talking to you. I just got a phone call. I didn't mean to take that. So as I always say, everyone you meet has a story to tell that you haven't heard. All you have to do is listen. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'll probably talk about my favorite movies that start with the letter F. So thank you all once again